So I've been playing a ton of Last Epoch, and I started back in early access, and it's just so awesome to see another one of these AA games reach such critical acclaim, and only for $35. That's a huge W in my opinion. But do I honestly think that Last Epoch is a Diablo killer? Not so much. I think Diablo is the Diablo killer, but Last Epoch is a lot of fun. And I don't think that any single game is ever going to be the death of another game unless we're talking about Overwatch 2 literally wiping the existence of the original off the planet. Rest in peace. And to be totally fair, Diablo 4 had a pretty great launch overall with good reception.
First non-broken game released this year. Yeah, and that's actually a good point. We got to give credit where credit is due. Blizzard did not f this launch up. This is a WS tier launch. There's been no massive bugs. There's not like nobody can get on the servers. There haven't been like 5-hour queues. There's no error 37.
The same could be said about Last Epoch for some people, but they did have major server issues, and even after this 1.0 release, I'm still having frequent performance issues and crashes, if I'm being honest.
You can get into Steam. I want to see how bad it is. Reviews. Oof. No one's playing online right now. Pretty sad after such a long early access phase to bomb on release like this. It is kind of sad, I agree. If you're looking to play this game at a party of 3 people, then you shouldn't be ready to spend 3 hours trying to get the party and synchronizing in the same instance, then say, oh well, and go play something else. Oof, bro. Last Epoch bad, bro. Last Epoch bad. Sorry, but the indefinite loading screen is too much. 5 hours played, level 14.
We also have to keep in mind that this game isn't even on consoles. It doesn't even have a release date yet. So to say that it's going to kill Diablo is just a little bit far-fetched when it's not even on all platforms. And who knows what's going to come out before then that's going to take the attention of everyone on console. And that's not to say that it's not going to have the same or even better success on console. I have no idea, but I just know that a lot of console players are a little bit more fickle and they tend to rely on heavy marketing to get behind a game, if you will.
Wait, did you guys see that Diablo is the fastest selling Blizzard game of all time? Are you out of your mind? What is going
it's the
on?
Sight of blood. And in Diablo 4, there are rivers of it. Show me your worst in-game death with hashtag Diablo deaths, and you might.
What is going on? Also, okay, I get it. They're trying to put some booba in the game or something, huh? Okay, maybe I was wrong on the Diablo 4 marketing strategy.
Might get a eulogy from yours truly, telling the world that you went out like a hero. Or a chump.
I mean, she's very pretty, man. She's very pretty, man.
And that's not a dig or any offense to console players, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to point out that there's arguably a different culture between console players and PC players, if you get what I'm trying to say. And let me just get something else out of the way while we're here. I'm not on the hate bandwagon of Diablo 4, believe it or not. I know. Cancel me. But I'm also not here to white knight for Blizzard. I don't disagree that the monetization is getting way out of control and that Blizzard as a whole makes a ton of bad decisions. I remember the launch of Diablo 3 and it was met with a lot of the same criticisms. It probably took nearly 5 seasons for that game to be considered good. But again, to be totally fair, most live service games have this problem. Look at Destiny, it had one of the worst launches ever.
That's it? What the fuck? Son of a bitch. You done fucked it up.
But it wasn't until the 3rd expansion, The Taken King, before people actually considered it a good game. And as bad as a $60 horse skin sounds, a lot of creators were making this sound a lot worse than what it was. They left out the part that it does come with in-game currency. But again, I'm not here to defend any decision that Blizzard makes, because none of this shit needs to be in the game one way or another. I can totally agree with that, but it's just very insincere to your audience, and it just won't make the game any better to fabricate the situation. Blizzard is greedy, I think we can all agree on that, but there is much worse going on in the industry right now. Again, I'm not justifying Blizzard in any way, I just move on from a game when I'm not having fun with it anymore. It's just not a deal breaker for me that they sell overpriced cosmetics in their shop. As long as I can play the game and still have fun, I just have a hard time giving a shit. I'm sorry, maybe I'm selfish. If everyone else wants to have a fashion show instead of play the game, then let them do it. Fine, it funds the game in my opinion. I put a lot of time into Destiny 2, and maybe I'm just conditioned to this, but I also knew when to draw a line with Destiny 2. Destiny 2 is by far the worst with cosmetics, and they can't be bothered to give anything great outside of the shop at all. Although I have heard some say the same thing about Diablo 4, but I still found myself liking a lot of the cosmetic loot outside of the shop. I never found myself having the urge to spend money to fit in with anybody like in Destiny 2. What I'm trying to say is I just stand at a middle ground as someone who enjoyed their time with Diablo 4, and I just moved on to other games like I would any other time. It wasn't because of anything specific. I'm just more about gameplay, if you will. A gameplay Andy, and if there's fun to be had there, I'm gonna play it. And when people say that there's zero fun to be had in Diablo 4, especially the people that put thousands of hours into it and now they say it's trash, it's just kind of stupid. But for me, I just played Diablo 4 for hundreds of hours, moved on because I got kind of bored with the gameplay in general. I've just never had this mindset to be married to a game that it has to be something that I'm interested in forever. That's just a really high standard to hold. Maybe I'm just a casual, who knows, but between working and content creation, I might get an hour or two at the end of the day to play games, but if I'm being honest, most of the time I will go days without playing games, so I do what I can. And honestly, I'd go as far as to say that Diablo 4 gets a lot of extra hate just because it's Blizzard in general. And it's not to say that this isn't deserved and they didn't tarnish their own reputation most of the time.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
No,
But holding the new Blizzard to the standard of the old Blizzard is just somewhat pointless to me. In other words, if your expectations are of the old Blizzard, then you will always be disappointed by what the new Blizzard is putting out. And I'm just trying to point out that it's becoming increasingly popular to hate on Blizzard, so sometimes it's just really hard to give any credit where it might be due sometimes.
You know, we gotta give credit where credit is due.
They are not the same people, and holding them to the standard of their golden era is 100% going to just set you up for disappointment almost every time. And again, it's crazy to have thousands of hours logged into a game like D4 and then turn around and call it trash because you're just burned out on the game now. It's just move on to a different game now. You just played it too much. I'll be honest with you, there's very few games that can hold my attention for that long before I just get flat out burned out on it. I put maybe 1,000 hours into Baldur's Gate 3 and I just had to put it down and play different games, but it doesn't mean it's bad or boring. I just played it a shit ton. And again, I'm not here to defend any bad decision that Blizzard has made as a whole for Diablo 4 because it's certainly far from perfect. I'm simply just trying to put it into context that I'm just not another guy on the internet hating Diablo 4 because D4 bad. Maybe I'm just kind of burned out on cancel culture as a whole, and it just seems like a lot of shit on the internet just gets kind of blown out of proportion all the time. And I just don't like when people make things seem worse than what they actually are. Let's just focus on what actually is the problem and fix it. But that's about all I'm going to say about Diablo 4. I played it, I had some fun, and I moved on. And I'll probably play it again soon. And if you want my full take on Diablo 4 or a review, just let me know in the comments. With all that out of the way, I did play PoE, but I just don't think that that game is for me. It seems to fall more in the hardcore side of things, even though I hate that word. I know some people might be considered hardcore players and still just don't understand every system in this game, and maybe that's great for some people, but I just don't have the time for that sort of thing. Some people love maximum complexity, and there should always be games out there for everybody. I don't disagree with that. And honestly, maybe I just didn't give it a fair enough chance at the time. I just felt like going from Diablo 4 to PoE was one extreme to the other, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that I won't give PoE another shot in the future, it just maybe wasn't the right time for me. And I'll certainly be trying the sequel when it comes out. I'll always be a variety gamer at heart, and I always want to dip my toes into something new. Although when I do find something I love, I have been known to obsess like it like anybody else. Anyway, last Epoch has been a breath of fresh air. But do I think it's the Diablo killer? Absolutely not. But what it absolutely does do is compete, especially at that $35 price point. In a normal scenario or a normal world, comparing a AA game with a AAA giant wouldn't even be fair. But here we are in 2024 and AA games are just absolutely dominating right now. And rightly so. This game was better in the end of early access than a lot of AAA games were at launch. Does this game's graphics blow your mind? No, but again, I'll admit I don't really care about those sort of things as I'm more focused on gameplay, I guess. I'm also not saying this game looks bad, because there's a lot of instances where it looks just as good as Diablo 4 in a lot of the environments, until you decide to zoom in on your character. I think the long and short of it is Last Epoch manages to know exactly who their audience is and what they want. They have taken a lot of criticism from early access and mistakes that their competitors have made and just thrown it into their game. And I think a lot of people, including myself, are just considering this game more of a middle ground between PoE and Diablo 4, which I kind of mentioned earlier. Where Diablo 4 is very cut back and very approachable to a casual, maybe that's me. But it maybe holds your hand a little too much, as PoE is just downright overcomplicated. Last Epoch seems to sit comfortably right in the middle, but still sometimes gives you a challenge. And it's not to say that it can't be as complex as PoE even, it just seems like it's more in a digestible package. Everything's just more split apart, like the skill trees. They're big, but they're in sections, so it's just a little bit easier to take it all in. It's not overwhelming. Last Epoch is pretty easy still for the most part, but there was plenty of times where I actually had to think about what I was doing and pay attention. It's not just all mindless gameplay all the time. Like I said earlier, the skill trees can kind of be considered a middle ground in Last Epoch. Your choice has meaning because there is repercussion for changing, and it was a huge criticism of D4 that you can just change it loosely without any kind of repercussion whatsoever. But I kind of feel like, to D4's defense, this doesn't really feel terrible to me. I kind of liked the option of just changing my build on the fly. But I do admire sitting right in the middle and doing it differently, and it does at least make you have to be more thoughtful about your choices, and in turn could feel more rewarding, and maybe immerse you into the game even more. It's all obviously by design. They know exactly what they're doing here. But how does such a small studio get it right? They listen. This might be a crazy concept to a lot of devs out there, but simply listening to your player base for years in an early access phase can make your game feel almost perfect by launch. By having all the quality of life features that have been missing from a game like D4, and fair and worthwhile loot drops, and a pretty addicting endgame for a 1.0 release, it's just a recipe for success. And that's not to say that the endgame is perfect, and you can argue that any endgame boils down to just killing more enemies for rewards, but the way it's packaged just makes you feel like you're accomplishing something and not just doing it for the sake of doing it. And that just seems to be the overall theme of this game. It's just all about how it's packaged. It might have a lot of the same core features and mechanics, but just the way it's delivered to you just makes it feel a lot more rewarding in the end. I want to save the end game for like the dedicated review. This isn't a review of Last Epoch. It's just kind of a discussion between D4 and Last Epoch and maybe a first thoughts, but I'm definitely going to take a deeper dive when I've had more time with the game in general. But again, there isn't anything groundbreaking happening here. They just managed to make it feel better than D4's endgame just by presenting it differently, I guess, and just giving it a bit more choice. I can't speak on PoE's endgame because I never made it there. The packaging of Diablo 4's endgame just didn't feel like an endgame because it's essentially the same thing that you were doing throughout the entirety of the game. And this might sound kind of crazy to people, but I don't tend to judge these games or any game by their end game. I think it has to be fun from the beginning all the way to the end. Because honestly, I really hate the argument that a game gets fun after X amount of hours. And although I've played some pretty slow burners like Persona 5, it's rarely actually the case that if I'm not having fun in the beginning, that I'm going to have fun in the end. Which, obviously, these types of games like ARPGs can be argued that the game is the end game, but I still think it needs to be fun in the beginning of the game. I was just thinking that it's kind of cool how in the last few years that there's been so many early access games that no one really knew a lot about, and then they go on to just blow up and set the internet on fire. I think Hades and Baldur's Gate 3 might be the most recent ones for me, but there has been some real magic happening in early access as of late. But like I said with Baldur's Gate 3, I think it just boils down to gamers making games. I mean, this studio was founded on a group of guys that met on Reddit, and they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play, so they did. To wrap this all up, this game is pretty accessible, and it's proven by the fact that someone like me can pour this many hours into it. It doesn't seem to take itself too seriously and just focuses on great gameplay and treating the player with respect. And although just about anyone can pick this game up and have a good time, veterans of the genre can still have a great time and feel right at home. Last Epoch is obviously far from perfect, and I do plan on covering more of the bad. It's just hard to see the bad with such a great launch like this, and maybe I'm just in the honeymoon phase of this game still. There is still plenty of competition on the horizon. D4's new expansion is coming and the new PoE is coming, but it's just awesome to have all this competition. It might not be the Diablo killer, but competition is what we needed in this space overall, so it's going to make all these games better. Sorry for all the jump cuts. I'm not great at speaking into a camera. I tend to look up when I'm thinking and speaking, but thank you guys for all the support. If you like the video, please give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.